Good afternoon, folks. It's ELT Live. This is the third one, and I'm really glad that all of those who've been able to have joined us this afternoon. We're going to touch on a whole range of issues this afternoon, with colleagues from ELT picking up on many of the points that have come through on Slido, and then also providing some updates regarding a whole range of issues to do with our current situation. But I first of all want to start by thanking each and every one of you and all your colleagues for everything that you're continuing to do in these unprecedented times. And I would ask that you do pass on mine and ELT's best wishes and thanks to all the colleagues who you are working with, because without us all working together, we would not be achieving what we are. This is, as I say, unprecedented in terms of the kind of challenge that an organisation like ours or our country more generally has had to face. And we are learning as we go forward. But what I've been struck by every day as I've talked to managers from different homes and schemes in different parts of the organisation is just how much everybody is really pulling together in this situation, and how people are going not only the extra mile, but kind of the extra 10 miles to achieve what they need to for their residents, for their members, for each other as their colleagues. So a heartfelt thanks, and please do not feel in any way that anything any of you are doing is remotely taken for granted, because we are one body and we really do need to work together, and we are all dependent on one another. I wanted to start by giving you a very brief update on where we stand with what's happening in terms of the impact of COVID-19 on MHA. Sadly, to date, we have now lost 280 of our residents. Of those, about 80 have been confirmed as actually having had the virus. The other 200 have been presenting symptoms at the point at which they died. But as you will have seen from the reports and the media that we've been doing, what is really hard is many of our homes and schemes are not having GPs go in or district nurses. And so our homes and schemes are having to confirm when their residents die, and then work with GPs over the phone to certify the death of those residents. So this is the figure that we are working with at the moment, and we are working as well to try and make sure that there's a greater clarity around these mortality figures as we go forward. You will have seen that the ONS figures and the CQC figures came out this week, and they are all saying that we have grossly underestimated to this point the number of deaths, particularly in care homes. And if we look at our own figures in terms of the number of people who we would expect to pass on at this time of year, our figures are about 65% above that. So you can see the kind of toll that this is taking. And what is so hard is that this is very differential across the whole of MHA. About 50% of our homes have not experienced anybody with the virus or presenting symptoms of the virus yet. But of the other 50%, some have had 1 or 2 cases, others something of the order of kind of 5 to 10. But then there are a small cohort of our homes which have experienced significant numbers of deaths of residents. And for them, this has been such a hard journey that they are going on. And we're trying to put in the support that we can to enable those teams to cope. But clearly that is going to be a huge situation for which they are to recover. But talking of recoveries, what is heartening is that we've had around 309 of our residents actually come through the other side and recover, which is really good news, and I think gives all our homes such a sense of hope, because otherwise it can feel very fatalistic when you see people starting to develop these symptoms. But I don't think you can underestimate the toll this is taking. And Anna will touch on it later, we really do need to take care of each other and ourselves as we go through these difficult times. I referred a moment ago to the lobbying, and we've had a number of successes. You'll have seen that Pav and her team have managed to engage us in a whole range of media, radio, TV, newspaper, in terms of really getting the agenda across. And it's been really good this week to see Steve, the manager at Stratton House, and some of his team on the 10 o'clock news on the BBC and on Radio 4 News at 6 o'clock. And then Julie, the manager from Westbury Grange, not only doing the article a couple of weeks ago on The Guardian, but also doing a podcast, which I recommend anybody listen to, because it is a very heartfelt, very compassionate, but so professional stance that she describes in terms of supporting families and colleagues as they have gone through some of the really difficult times, as being one of the homes that's lost a considerable number of their residents over this period. And we'll continue to put everything in place as best possible to support those residents and colleagues. And our lobbying has chiefly, as you will have heard, been around PPE and around testing, and really trying to get people to understand the impact that COVID is having upon MHA, but not only MHA, all the care home sector, and for services for older people. Part of our work in terms of that lobbying has been the petition for PPE that has been on our website. We've had over 1,600 people already signed up to that. That's very much been promoted across Methodist Church and out into the community. We've also launched a fundraising scheme, and to date, we have raised £29,000 across a number of different fundraising campaigns, which is a huge success in only a couple of weeks. And that, again, is to support the costs of PPE, because although we are getting some of that money from government, quite a bit of it we are having to buy from the open market, and that costs often about 5 times the price that we would normally be having to pay. But our duty of care to our residents and to our colleagues is that we need to make sure that we have sufficient PPE in order to support them. Just a couple of other points. In terms of that fundraising, many of you will have seen around the 2.6 challenge, which has replaced the London Marathon and many other of the large-scale charity events that would take place around this time of year. And it's about saving Britain's charities and recognising the impact of the current lockdown and the current context on donations and charitable giving. So I'm going to put a bit more detail about that in my written message, email message that comes out later today. But I know that Debbie Phillips and her team are doing a whole range of events. I think Debbie's doing 26 sit-ups with a MHA balloon or something like that. But please engage with that and see what you can do. I'm going to do a 26-mile cycle ride on Sunday as well to join in. So please get involved with these things. They are important because they're about us sustaining the pressure that we need to get that message across. And actually, to bring it really close to home, what I would like us to do now is to think about those 280 residents who we have lost, and to particularly think as well about our 2 staff members who we have also lost, Lynn and Katrina. And we're going to just take a minute's silence now to remember them, to remember our colleagues facing the daily trauma of caring for people with COVID-19, and just to hold the organisation in mind. So we'll just take a minute's silence now. Thank you, colleagues. These are sobering times, and we do need to hold each other in mind and hold the challenges that we face in mind on a day-to-day basis, as well as work with hope, which I know you're all doing. And so many accounts I hear are of how we keep the lifeblood going of this organisation and the positivity of the experience for the people in our care. I'm now going to hand over to Dan, who's going to take you through a number of points Dan.
Come off of mute. Afternoon, everybody. It's good to talk to everybody. I'm going to, as usual, round up a number of the questions that have come up on Slido together and try and take those in a group. But I just wanted to start once again by kind of offering my thanks to everybody for the fantastic. There are the big stories about the work that's going on and the people that are going over and above in our care homes where we've got significant outbreaks of the virus. But I spend a little bit of time every day and have a couple of calls through to managers of homes and schemes. And I just heard so many stories from people about different things that are going on in different homes and schemes, pop-up shops that are happening in retirement living schemes to make sure that residents have got access to supplies, befriending schemes popping up, community support. Just today I've picked up some information about some telephone sing-alongs that are happening and even a WhatsApp ukulele lesson that's been taking place. So the breadth of things that are happening in response to this is just phenomenal, really. But I wanted to just reflect for a little bit on just how fast moving the situation is. And I know that as a result of that, it can be a really confusing picture sometimes. And reading through the comments on Slido, I kind of really get that sense that there's some frustration around the amount of information that's coming and the way that that's sometimes communicated. And I think that confusion can be reflected at all levels, and certainly even with myself. The amount of information that comes to us from commissioning guidance from the government, from public health, sometimes can contradict itself from one day to another, and we have to find a way to pass that on to you. So I hope that we manage to do that in as succinct a way as we possibly can. I just want to remind people that where there is confusion about that, if you feel that there is a conflicting message, we do have a central email address for which is mhacoronavirus@mha.org.uk. And you can use that if you've got concerns or questions or have confusions. If you push that through, it will get picked up by us at head office. And whether it's a clinical question, an operational question, or something for HR, we'll pick that up and turn that around and make sure that we provide a consistent response to you. And I think the other thing around that as well, this came out of one of my calls with a scheme, with a retirement living scheme at Adlington in Rose. Just chatting to Jackie, the manager there, who mentioned that when all of the information that we send out from Epworth House comes through, she kind of prints it and updates and maintains a COVID folder for staff, because very often people haven't got time to go onto the internet, they're not catching that information, and just to have a physical resource for people to go and refer to. So if that's a useful suggestion, I just thought I'd kind of share that with people. One of the other questions that's come up on Slido is about our admissions process at the moment and whether we should be admitting residents at a time of crisis such as this. And I think particularly one of the concerns is admitting residents into homes where we currently don't have the virus. I think it's really important to think about the reason why we remain open to admissions. Much of that is because we're part of a national effort to address the crisis that's affecting all of us, and we have to be open to taking some of the pressure off the NHS where that's required. But also, I think we do have to remain aware of the fact that we are going to come out of this at some point, and we need to be in a position financially to come out of that well. I'm sure Victoria will give you some more information around that later, but just wanted to make people aware that we've moved from a position before this hit us of being around about 92% occupancy across our care home business. We are now at just over 83% occupancy. So we've had a real significant hit there. and at the same time as that happening, clearly with the use, and to take a decision to close to admissions would just compound that for us. So we need to think about that in those terms as well. And I also just wanted to touch briefly on the question of testing. There's been a lot of questions on the Slido around testing. And again, this is one of those situations that's moving incredibly quickly. So I think we've gone within the space of the last week from a position where there really wasn't any testing available to there being drive-through tests that were pretty inaccessible for people to get to there now being an online system that managers can book people in for tests. As of today, apparently the government website is available for people to self-refer and book their own tests, although I think that's got its own issues as well. But I wanted to make you aware that we have managed to become part of a pilot test with the Department of Health and Social Care for postal testing. So many of you will know we've been in the process of gathering email addresses for our colleagues who are currently self-isolating, because we're part of a pilot with the Department of Health and Social Care to do postal testing for all of those colleagues. Assuming that goes through, we will very quickly roll on to being able to test all of our colleagues. And we're also submitting data today to arrange for postal tests to be sent to all of our homes and schemes with sufficient tests to provide a test for all of our residents in both care homes and retirement living. And I fully anticipate that within the course of the next week or so, we'll move to a position where we're able to provide postal tests on a rolling and regular basis for everybody. And the reason that's so incredibly important is we found on a number of occasions where people have gone for testing, even where they're asymptomatic, that people have tested positive without symptoms and people have tested negative with symptoms. And it's really important that we identify early where the virus is active. Even if you feel that you don't have anybody symptomatic in your home, it may still be the case that we've got people carrying the virus. And if we can identify through a system of regular testing where that's happening, we can take really quick and effective action to contain that and to limit the effects of the virus. So it's really just a plea. There'll be some comms coming out to everybody today. We really need to get email addresses for everybody, for all of our colleagues as soon as possible, because that's the way that we're going to be able to pass that information on to the department to ensure that everybody's able to access those tests. I think I've probably used up my time, so I'm going to pass over now to Anna. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just realised I've been unmuted as I was looking for the mute button. Thank you. I have to start. I know it may feel repetitious, but I don't feel I can say thank you enough. And hearing all of the incredible stories about the compassionate care and support to our residents and the level of support for our colleagues, both within immediate teams, but then across MHA is just fantastic. So thank you. The themes that I've picked up are around wellbeing, annual leave, sick pay, furlough, and then pay for additional nursing duties. So I'll start with wellbeing, and it remains hugely important for all of us, and it was a significant focus of our ELT meeting yesterday. We have a three-stage approach, and if I'm able to, I'll just see if I can share my screen. Am I able to share my screen here? No, I don't think I am. That's a shame. I've got a nice little graph to share with you, but I'll put that up on the intranet afterwards. But our three-stage approach is a wellbeing toolkit and resources, which has been sent out and shared with you all. We're now moving on to our wellbeing session for managers. These are practical sessions around support and building up network and building resilience. And then also enhanced support, which is one-to-one sessions that are available to everybody, counselling of up to 6 sessions for whatever mental various issues that perhaps working from home, perhaps challenging situations, dealing with family issues, they're available to all of us at any time, and that's free of charge. It's independent and independent from MHA and confidential, so please do make use of that. The number's on the intranet, or ask your manager or come to HR if you can't find that. We're also extending opportunities for group sessions for all of our teams if there are particular circumstances, especially for some of our homes which are going through some really, really challenging situations at times. And we're building on that with our internal resource around mental health first aid. So the need to support each other in our different experiences and responses at different times has been recognised. So we're really wanting to build on the coaching culture that we have been starting to embed, and also just that recognition of being understanding and supportive of each other. I know that a couple of the comments related to those wellbeing sessions just being for managers currently rather than for all our people. We started with that on the basis that equipping our managers and supporting those who are leading teams to be able to support all of our people would be a good approach to focus our initial support, and we have around 40 of those sessions. But hearing it, and thank you for the feedback, we're now looking at how we might investigate rolling out those wellbeing sessions to all of our teams. So do continue to give us your feedback. Our wellbeing response will continue to be developed according to needs and your feedback, and will remain really essential throughout this time. Not only during the time whilst we're right in the midst of the pandemic, but immediately afterwards, when people take that moment and reflect, and needing support sort of post that initial time. So do give us your feedback on that. So talking of wellbeing, my next item is annual leave. There were some comments around the concern that we may be in a position where there is limited holiday. People are taking limited holiday in this first part of the year, and then a number of, being an excess of people wanting to take holiday at the latter part of the year, and how we might manage that. So again, I'll say a huge thank you to all those who have cancelled holiday and are often working overtime and doing extra hours to care and support for older people, both on the front line and then supporting that, whether that be within volunteering, fundraising, HR, finance, or estates. What we do is we do recognise that there are times when people haven't been able to take holiday, particularly when there is an outbreak in our services. And it's a difficult balance to get, but it's also really important that we take time when we can to look after ourselves. So would really encourage teams to try and plan for breaks to enable people to look after themselves. As we know, the pandemic has been going on now for several weeks and is likely to continue for some time. So we really do need to build our resilience whenever we can. And where there is opportunities, that's when we should be looking to schedule our holidays and take time. Our hope really is then that we can space our holiday for our wellbeing, but if we need to consider pay at a later date, we will of course do that. But having offered the opportunity for paid holiday at the end of the last financial year, we're in the fortunate position of moving to the start of the year, that there hopefully should be ample opportunity for us to manage to take some breaks when we can. Moving on to sick pay, you'll recall that for those who are self-isolating, statutory sick pay from day one is payable. MHA took the decision to uplift that from, it was £94 in the last financial year. That's been increased to £95.85 for this financial year. MHA has taken the decision to uplift that to £150 per week for each person for full-time work, pro rata for part-time, and we took that decision until the end of April in the first instance. I'm pleased to say that we have agreed to extend that uplift, so £150 per week full-time, until the end of June in the first instance, and then if necessary we'll continue to review that. So that's an extension of the sick pay. Moving on to furlough, there are some changes as we move forward. We've been following the government advice in relation to the approach since the start of COVID-19, and in particular the treatment of our people, both in terms of ensuring safe practices and support for absences relating to the virus. As time's gone on, and obviously it's new for the government and for all of us, the furlough definition appears to be broadening, and that's been including more groups of people as time goes on. And for that reason, we are now looking to offer furlough to those who are unable to work, so those who are and having to self-isolate for continued periods. For those who are over 70s, for those who are over 70, for those who are pregnant, or for those who have significant underlying health conditions, as detailed by Public Health. Our previous guidance stands in order to undertake a risk assessment for any of the people who have fallen into those groups, and if the risk assessment indicates that we can't undertake stringent social distancing, if that's not possible at work, or that working from home isn't possible, then we would be looking at authorised absence. So now we're inviting those colleagues to move to furlough. And the difference is moving from our uplifted sick pay to a payment of 80% of the monthly average wage, which is up to £2,500 with the usual deductions. So furlough is considered to be a temporary variation to terms and conditions of employment. So that's why we need to agree that with each individual, and the individual provides consent. So HR will be starting a process of contacting managers and supporting them to effect that change for those colleagues in those groups. So that's furlough. My last point is additional nursing duties. So we know that in some instances GPs and district nurses have been unable to attend the home as they've previously done, and as a result of that they've been asking us to pick up some of their duties. So our first response is to try and push back and say that those duties remain the responsibility of the district nurse and should continue to do so. However, in cases where that hasn't been able to happen and nurses are not able to visit the home, we recognise our residents' best interests and we have to continue to support them. So on an exceptional and temporary basis during this COVID-19 period, we will support our people to receive training, have a competency assessment and pick up some specific nursing support tasks. I think Sam mentioned that at the outset. So these are duties such as dressings, wound care, blood glucose and vital observations. So once that training has been undertaken and we've achieved the competence to undertake those skills, then we will pay a lump sum of £200 per month full-time equivalent for each individual that's undertaking those additional duties. So the communication which went out recently, we'd anticipated that being senior care assistants, but it's been raised that in some instances assistant home managers or deputy home managers have been undertaking these duties, and the additional payment is intended for all of those who have done the training and are undertaking those duties. So as I say, that's a temporary position. We want the duties to rightly revert back to the district nurses as soon as possible, but in the interim where people are being trained and competent and having to undertake those duties, with our thanks, we will pay that additional sum. So the process is for managers to give a list of those people to payroll before the end of the month, and then we can process things. So those were all of my topics. I think I'm handing over to Mandy Mottram. Thank you.
Hello everybody, thanks Anna. And again, I'd like to add my thanks to all our staff who are doing such an amazing job looking after all our residents and scheme members across our organisation. So I've been asked to pick up a couple of points that have been raised on Slido, and the first of those is in relation to wills and whether we have a will writing service. We do have a free will writing service that we provide, and we are just moving to a new provider. They're called Bequeathed Limited. So MHA pay an annual fee, and then anyone can, staff and residents can use that service to help them draft a will. There is no obligation to leave a legacy to any one or particular person. So, you can feel free to use that service. It's also, we're just literally in the process of moving to a new provider. It's not up and running at the moment, but as soon as it is, we will send out that information in a communication to all the organisations so that you know that you can then just log on. It's an online service. You can log on to it and use it whenever you want. And that's an ongoing service at any time for all of our staff and residents. Another question was in relation to, do we have a death in service form? And this is one of the benefits of the new MyMHA system, that you can actually log into that and change your nominations for a death in service payment on MyMHA. So again, you can update that at any time. I'm really sorry to hear that some people have been having issues logging into MyMHA. There are 3 ways of logging in depending on how you're accessing the service, and details of that are on the intranet and have also been sent out in a series of emails. There is also the training module that is accessible on the intranet. But if you are still having problems with that, then please do email the team at mymha@mha.org.uk, because they are there to assist. We are there to help and support you using the new system. New systems are always bound to have teething problems, so hopefully those will be sorted shortly, and you will all be able to access MyMHA as you want to. But as I say, the death in service form is on there, and you can update that at any time. And I think that's all of the questions I had to deal with. So I'll pass you on to Andy.
And I've been automatically unmuted, which is very good. Again, thank you everybody for everything that you're doing. It's an amazing place, and it makes me feel really proud to work here. PPE is understandably one of the issues that has arisen again on the Slido questions, and I think everybody's aware of the shortages of PPE to the NHS, the care sector, and across the country generally. It's positive to say that none of our homes so far have actually run out of PPE at any stage, and that is really good, and that's as a result of a lot of hard work by a lot of people. The government supply chain, however, that we've been relying on has proven increasingly unreliable, and quite often stocks are not available. So because we've got a real concern and a real duty of care to make sure residents and our employees have all the PPE they need, we've been sourcing PE outside of that government supply line, and been sourcing it from all around the world, and it's starting to bear fruit. We've got some deliveries that are landing on care homes today, and I've had a few emails about those already. So thank you for the feedback that they're arriving. Unfortunately, we're trying to notify people when central deliveries are arriving at homes. It doesn't always work because it's quite sporadic. We're relying upon some quite complicated supply chains. So if something does arrive in large boxes with masks and gowns, please don't turn it away. Hang on to it. Please don't turn it away, whatever you do. At the moment, the supply line that we've got and the stock we've got is quite good. I mean, cautious, but it's quite good for the short to medium term. We've got all the kit that we need, and we're able to supply all of the home's needs as required. It might be that some of that stock isn't necessarily in the right place at the right time, but don't worry about that. There's a procedure in place that you should all know about that will allow us to move that stock from one home to another at very, very short notice. If you don't know what that is, please drop an email to the procurement email address or myself, and we'll get that note out to you. But basically, if there is a shortage, contact your RD or your area manager. They will know where the stock is, and they can arrange for stock to move around. So we will be able to carry on and make sure you've got the supplies you need, which is very, very positive. We've got one of the positives around the lobbying that we've actually been progressing over the past few weeks is we're starting to receive quite a lot of donations of PPE from a lot of small suppliers and manufacturers who wouldn't normally make PPE. Now that's really good, and we really do encourage it. However, we need to be mindful that not all of that kit has been tested and has passed the necessary tests we would normally expect to make sure that they're usable and effective. So what I would say around those donations, please accept donations. Please let us know what you've received, but please use them very much as a last resort if there is nothing else available. At the moment, the supply chain with MHA is sufficient, so you shouldn't really need to rely on those donations, but keep it there just in case. And we've got somebody, I think it's Inti talking to me there. Very nice of you.
Sorry.
Hi, Inti.
Sorry.
So, a communication went out about the PPE earlier on, which hopefully just gives you an update. But I think my key message here is that the situation has improved from our end. It isn't by any means a very, very robust supply chain. We've got sufficient for now and sufficient for the medium term, but we will continue lobbying. We will continue purchasing outside the government supply chain where we need to, and we'll do whatever we can to make sure that you've got the PPE in the right place at the right time. I think that's me done. So I will now pass on to Chris.
I'm here. Hello. I think I'm just going to say a word about memorial services, because this is something that's come up and been raised by one or two people. Obviously, where it's possible within homes and schemes, we will be doing things as a need requires, and as the practice of being able to allow people to congregate may change in the coming weeks. But obviously in time, certainly at MHA, we will be thinking about how to recognise both colleagues and residents who passed away during this time. And I imagine that we will be working with managers in particular, but also with colleagues in services to be able to refine what it is people would like to bring to those occasions, and the shape and the character of what we will be doing in order to remember people. So please be assured, if you do have any ideas at the moment or things occur to you that you'd like to share, then by all means, if you could just send them to me, we will feed that into the considerations and the plans as they develop. Who am I handing over to?
It's me. Afternoon, everybody, and with the rest of the ELT, I'd like to join them and thanking you very much for everything that you're doing, going over and above. It makes MHA a wonderful place to be. So I'm going to update you on our year-end performance. So we finished the year-end at the 31st of March with a total net surplus of 16.6 million, which is adverse to the latest forecast by 0.3 million. So a great performance overall, with the adverse variance driven by period 12 performance. As we'd anticipated, there was a cash depletion in the year, which at 2 million was slightly higher than we forecast due to less housing for sales income offset by lower capital expenditure. We have an end of year cash balance of 42 million, which puts us in a strong position and sounds like an awful lot of money to have, but actually only gives us just over 2 months of operational costs in normal times, let alone in current times when we've got increased PPE and agency costs coming through. So looking at period 12 specifically, total net surplus for the month of 0.8 million, which is just over half of what we'd forecast in the month. So coronavirus had a relatively small effect on the full year results for 1920, and certainly not as significant as we'll see from period 1 of this financial year onwards, because it only impacted for about 2 weeks at the end of the financial year. The most significant impact that we saw was on care homes occupancy, average weekly fee and staffing costs. So as Dan has already mentioned, our occupancy reduced to 90.7% from 91% in period 11. We also saw a far greater than usual average weekly fee reduction. Initial analysis has shown us that within MHA, our mortality appears higher in self-funders and particularly those with dementia. Staffing costs reflect a 32% increase in agency hours, although total hours still remain below 100% at 96.9%, so being managed really well. We're well aware of the need for the use of agency, and more so than ever at the moment, so the request is where possible to use Newvern and stay on panel and just watch out for the rates that you're being charged. Within care homes, other costs such as food, medical supplies, domestic and cleaning supplies all increased, which we'd expect to see in current circumstances. Within retirement living, we've seen increased empty properties, particularly in the housing association. We're also seeing the loss of significant care packages in retirement living as more frail tenants die from coronavirus. As I've already mentioned, housing for sale shortfall was driven by lower completions, partly due to land registry closures at the end of the year. So as I've said, we anticipate significant impacts on occupancy, average weekly fee, staffing and agency costs, as well as other operational costs such as PPE costs as we go into the new financial year. So we're now in the new financial year of 2021, and I'm sure you're aware that budgets were agreed by board in January prior to the COVID-19 pandemic outbreak. This means that they're already pretty much out of date for where the majority of us now find ourselves. So to reflect the reality of current circumstances, Finance will be undertaking a desktop exercise to amend existing budgets to reflect the COVID-19 impact on homes and schemes. We're likely to update these on a quarterly basis to reflect the fluidity of the situation that we're seeing. We hope to get these out to you as soon as possible prior to period 1 reporting deadlines. And that's it from me, so I'm going to hand back to Sam.
Responding to the various questions. I'm not sure whether you picked that first bit up, but thank you everybody for your contributions. A number of other questions have come in that I want to pick up on before I do a bit of a roundup at the end. We had some questions about VPN, and I'm aware that over the last couple of days particularly, there's been a resurgence in some problems with that. I've been talking with Paul Davis, our Director of IT, and our current VPN system was put in about 8 years ago and was designed and set up to operate from a maximum of 70 people. And on a normal basis, pre-lockdown, there was probably about 20 to 30 people or users on it at any one time before. We've now moved to having roughly around 300 people on VPN, so the system is creaking. And Paul is investigating an upgrade to try and help compensate for that. But there are some fixes going on, and there was one last night, and there's another one planned for the end of the working day today. So Paul and his team are on it in terms of trying to rectify this, but we are aware how inconvenient it is when VPN is not working. And we know that there are some workarounds that people have been using, but we will keep you posted on how we'll try to take that forward. Another question that's come in is, whilst I want to thank you for trying to provide us with all you can, I worry that with all the extra outgoings that this will put MHA at risk. And that's a really valid point, and it's one that Victoria particularly has been leading on, along with the rest of ELT and with our board of trustees, in trying to look at a range of scenarios and how MHA will be robust and strong coming through this. We are looking obviously at a range of factors which are impacting. Dan and Victoria already talked about occupancy. There's issues around agency staffing costs which have a particular bearing on that. So we are monitoring and working on that, and obviously we'll be taking measures to try and ensure that we keep MHA financially solvent and viable, and that will be an ongoing developing picture as we move through. What obviously is quite hard at the moment is we're having to take this on a quarterly basis in terms of reviewing our financial position, because the lockdown is clearly indeterminate at the moment in terms of an end point. So it makes it quite hard. And so we are at the moment revising budgets in relation to all our homes and schemes, because particularly those who've been very badly affected by the loss of residents, clearly that is going to take time to turn around again. Victoria, is there anything that you'd want to add on that one about the impact on the organisation?
Only to, I think you've summarised that really well, Sam. I think just please be aware, everybody, that myself and the finance team are working really hard to ensure that we stay financially viable as much as we can. We're working through lots of scenarios and trying to give ourselves lots of foresight into what the impact might be. We aren't aware. Obviously, I haven't got a crystal ball, unfortunately. It would be useful at this point, but it's difficult to predict what's going to happen, how long the outbreak is going to be, and what the financial impacts are going to be. But we're trying to understand what they are, and we're doing everything that we can to keep our cash to ourselves, not pay it out any more than necessary, whilst getting the balance between what we need to keep operating as an organisation and operating at the highest levels of safety that we can for you, our frontline staff.
Thank you, Victoria. Another question, I'm back off mute. Another question is that instead of a managers conference when we come out of lockdown, why not hold an MHA conference that honours our carers? Well, if we could afford a venue for 7,000, I would do it tomorrow. But we clearly have got to look at how we're going to do this. And at the moment, we're also having to be mindful that we may have to push the managers conference back, because we may not be out of social distancing arrangements by the time we get to October. So we're keeping that under review at the moment. But what we are mindful of is how we prize what it is that people are doing out there right across the organisation. And we're looking at a range of actions that we can take forward on a rolling basis that doesn't just highlight the thing that one particular person or one particular theme has done, but uses that as an exemplar of the sort of behaviours that we know are going on right across the organisation. Because we do want to value, we do want to honour everything that's going on out there, and we're trying to find ways to do that. And also just to keep, I suppose, that reference point that everybody is holding everybody else in mind at this difficult time. So watch the space on that. And if I could afford a 7,000 conference, I would. But we've obviously got the financial pressures that Victoria's been talking about as well. But we will be coming up with ways that we can celebrate that. Another question is, as the lockdown measures are lifted, are the ELT reconsidering the need to maintain a traditional head office, as many businesses are beginning to realise the savings that can be made from working remotely? We were talking about these issues in a book of the COVID-19 of different ways, both in terms of the way that we deliver our services, but also the way that we support those services. So Andy White is going to be leading a group of colleagues from across MHA in reviewing what are the new ways of working that can really help us move forward to operate in a more agile way, to deliver our services in a more efficient and effective way. So we're going to be looking at what's happening on the ground, testing out what the difference it is that it's making, looking as well at our efficiency around the way we provide all our support services. But it's too soon to yet be saying we're definitely going to be stopping this or starting that on a permanent basis. But we do recognise a huge amount of innovation that's going on at the moment, and we want to capitalise on that and a different shape as we emerge from this, because we're going to need to face the world and to retake the ground that obviously has been lost during this period. And then lastly, I want to pick up on a comment because it kind of nicely leads into what I want to say in closing. Somebody has put on Slido, in this time of crisis and sadness, I couldn't be prouder to be part of such a wonderful organisation with such dedicated people, from the carers to the support staff to the leadership. We are forever #1MHA, lots of likes on that one. And I just want to tell you two brief stories that I've picked up from my contact with people out in homes and schemes this week. One was from Abbey Park, where they have a huge amount of challenge at the moment because of the number of people who have contracted the virus, both in terms of the staff and also in terms of the residents. And yet, in amongst all of that, I received pictures this week of cards that the staff were making with the residents, all with hearts within them, some wooden, some made of plastic, some stickers, that were being sent out to their loved ones to say, not please remember me, but that I'm remembering you. And whenever you feel or take hold of this heart, know that I am thinking of you and sending you a virtual hug. And that just smacked to me so much of the duty of person-centered care that we take so seriously in this organisation. And the other example that I had this week was when I was talking to Maggie, who's the manager of our Adlington House scheme in Otley. It's a retirement living setting, and one of the couples living in that setting, the wife has dementia, quite advanced, and her husband contracted the virus and went into hospital and was put onto end-of-life care. But the level of care he needed was of the order that was going to require him to move to a hospice, which he was duly discharged to. But after a day in the hospice contacted Maggie and her team and said, he really wants to be with his wife for his last few days. Is there any way that you can mobilize your team in order to support this to happen? And Maggie worked with her team, and what it amounted to was 5 days of hour-on-hour, nil-by-mouth care for this gentleman. And this is a home that doesn't have nursing staff, but it's a home with carers, which enabled him to spend the last 5 days of his life with his wife before he passed on. And that just speaks to me that we make stuff happen in this organisation, and we're making stuff happen now, even in the midst of this crisis. In fact, even more so than we ever normally do. So a final huge thanks from myself, from the ELT, from the Board of Trustees for everything that you're doing, and carry on doing it, but do please take care of yourselves. Thank you ever so much, and take care.